Welcome to Mad Men, Episode 7, entitled 5G. I'm Jon Hamm, I play Don Draper.
I'm Aaron Staton, I play Kenneth Cosgrove.
This was an episode that was written and shot out of order. We decided that there needed to be an episode that sort of provided a little more background for Don and stuff, and this I believe was that. And Matt wrote it to plug in between those the last two episodes. It's also one of the few times we get to see Don and Betty sort of enjoying each other, which is also nice.
Hello, this is Elisabeth Moss, and I play Peggy Olson. Hamm is so perfect for his role, so perfect for Don. He's incredibly good looking. That's not new. But he's definitely got this classic look. I mean, he looks like he's just stepped right out of that era. Not necessarily in real life, but with the hair and with the suit, I mean, it's perfect. And I can't imagine who they could have cast that would have been better, because he has this sort of rugged old movie star thing that people like Humphrey Bogart had, people like Cary Grant. He's like a character actor stuck in a matinee idol's body, because he's got this depth to him, this emotional depth, but he's got these incredibly good looks, and it's a perfect play against each other.
The idea of just, I've been there. So, I don't even want to get up and turn the light off. I'll just pull the plug. The makeup on the pillowcase is fantastic.
It's great.
Again, we talk about a lot of consequences for people who overindulge are written into a lot of our episodes, where people drink, they get hungover. Smoke too much, they cough. Exactly. I think the attraction Don has to Betty is that she's sort of the perfect, ideal, quote-unquote wife, and yet it still leaves him a little unsatisfied.
This is where I found out that Ken gets published in the Atlantic Monthly, and I don't know, sort of the fun and interesting thing of working on television is learning about your character as you go along. And Rich and Michael and I were hired onto the pilot as guest stars with the possibility of recurring, and then when the series got picked up, we were asked to come along. And I remember playing pool with those guys, and we were like, if we could just come back and do like 2 episodes, that would be just, that would be amazing. And then we got to come along for the whole ride, and it's been amazing. And anyway, I was on my honeymoon the week before this episode, because I had about 4 days off, and my wife and I said, let's just do it. We got married about 6 months before, and I get off the plane and had a message, and Rich said, hey, you're a writer, by the way. In the episode you got waiting on your doorstep, you'll find out you're a writer. And a good writer, I guess.
And a good writer. That's the great thing about the character Ken, is that he's this unassuming kind of guy, whereas both Pete and Michael's character Paul are very sort of prideful and arrogant, and they are less successful than Ken, who sort of blunders into success.
Yeah.
Yeah, and seeing all those men in those suits is, it's not a bad thing to work with all day long. Seeing all those gorgeous men walk around in those wonderful suits, it's very pleasing to the eye. I think, the men talk about how much they love seeing the women in those clothes and in those heels and, the tight dresses and all those kind of things. I think they underestimate how much we like looking at them in those suits. They always look fantastic.
I watched a lot of movies and things, The Apartment, and actually what I found the most helpful was this documentary on Mickey Mantle, and it just, I don't know, to me it's sort of, it was sort of amazing, these guys in this time in New York, and it was sort of analogous in a way, and these guys in the bars, and they're smoking and on top of the world, and just the entire lifestyle. And he had his family back home, and he was sending money, and I just found all the visuals and just that lifestyle pretty, like I said, analogous. And also, this is funny.
This is the first time we see Midge calling Don at the office with sort of very salacious repartee that's not business-oriented. Where are you calling me from?
The bangs were Matt's idea. He was set on them from the very beginning. The pilot, actually, those are not real. They are made out of my own hair, but we glued them on every day. Starting in the second episode, those are my real bangs. And there was no fighting him on it. There was no going back. He was set on the bangs, and that's the way that we were going. And it works perfectly. It makes her look young. It gives her almost a 50s kind of feel. It makes her look innocent, and it gives her a very, very distinct look. And that ponytail I wear every single episode. Besides 3 scenes, my hair is in a ponytail every single scene. And that was just her look. And it got a little boring for me personally as an actress, but when you think about it, nobody really changes their hair. I mean, we all wear our hair pretty much the same way every day, and that's just the way that Peggy wears her hair. And although there's definitely a big negotiation right now about second season and getting that hair down, every time I see Matt, I practically tell him, we have to have that hair down. It has to come down. Please, please. I'm begging him.
There's 3 reactions, they're completely character-based reactions on this news of Ken actually being successful. Pete's suggestion that he wasn't born into success, so he shouldn't be successful. Michael's character Paul saying, like, he's just not good, so he shouldn't be successful. And Harry, Rich Sommer's character, saying, I can't believe he didn't tell anybody. Like, why wouldn't you be proud of that? They're all sort of disappointed.
I know, and everybody sort of has their distinct look. I mean, I could talk endlessly about Janie Bryan, our costume designer. I cannot imagine a better person to be working with on this show. First of all, she's gorgeous and an incredible dresser. She'll show up at, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning looking absolutely fabulous, wearing tight jeans and jewelry and heels. And you're just like, I stumble in my pajamas, and I'm just like, hi, Janie. I don't understand how you can get dressed like that in the morning. But that's just who she is. She's this incredible woman from the South. And she's got that accent and everything's y'all and darling. And she's so sweet and so nice, but she's also really, really good. And she's really specific, and she's not soft. She's very strong, and she knows what she wants. And she likes the men with their pants, high around their waist, and she likes the women in exactly the right stockings. And she's very detail-oriented, which is something you really need in this kind of a show, in a period piece. And I consider myself very, very lucky to get to be working with her, because I had a lot of special things to go through with the padding that escalated through the last 4 or 5 episodes. And That was a very, not the easiest thing to go through. I had to have somebody who I really trusted to make me comfortable and to make it look good. And I was so lucky to have somebody like her.
I think Don's attracted to her for a lot of the reasons we talked about with Rachel. She's an independent woman. She's not really beholden to anybody and has her own ideas and her own stuff going on and doesn't depend on Don to sort of define her. And yet what we realize is that Midge is, in a lot of ways, represents a similar aesthetic to the wives in Don's world, and yet it's just in a different world. She's in that beatnik kind of downtown, below 14th Street mode, but she's very much keeping up with the Joneses in her own way. I love the contrast between Don in bed with Midge and Pete in bed with Trudy.
I know.
They look like they're 14.
They really do. Well, I mean, I think they're all just, all just want to get ahead in business and in life, and people directly around you. I think that people they see it as competition, and
It's often seems to be like if someone is succeeding, that means other people are getting behind or failing. So I think that in varying degrees, the boys take it as a threat to their existence or their worth in the company or in the group, is that this guy's had success, so that means that he's more important than us, and that's threatening. Don's not threatened by any of that. He occupies a place well above those guys. They're clearly his subordinates. So it's like, good for you. You've succeeded. Yeah. Great.
Would there be anyone that Don would be threatened by their success?
Well, I think we see that, Don is subordinate to both Roger Sterling and Bert Cooper. And I think that's who he is deferential to.
Right.
Pimps out his wife to go sell him the story. It's truly amazing. This is where we discuss all of the projects that are coming through the agency.
It's interesting to see Joan at this table. We
Yes.
talked about that.
It's like the weirdest compliment ever. I hated it, but I guess other people will like it, so good for you. This is also a scene where, if you'll notice the walls in this, they are composed of panels. And they're composed of panels so we can pull them out and shoot from different angles all around it. So we spent a lot of time in the conference room. And during this scene, which is a very long scene, and took quite a long time to shoot, a lot of angles and such, they were pulling walls, moving the panels around and so forth, and they dropped one on my head, which ended my shooting day.
It looked like John almost caught it. He was right. He was.
I was facing where I was facing, which is away from the wall, and one of the guys lost control of it, and it landed on my head. I had 7 stitches. It was my first injury of many on this show, and
yeah. And then we had, I think, like one more angle on this.
Yeah, we didn't
scene.
have much more to do in it.
Yeah.
But that was the end of the day for everybody.
And then we finished the rest of the stuff with Michael and I with the story.
Right.
They were like, "You guys are supposed to do this at the end of the week, but Can you do it
We're
right
gonna
now?
pull that up
We're going to go ahead
now.
and do it now.
Okay.
I had 7 stitches in my head and a broken hand and a dislocated shoulder.
I didn't know about the shoulder.
That was part of the, that came a little later. But yeah.
Oh, really? Residual from
Residual, yes. Still there. My younger brother.
He's good. God, he was great.
Jay Paulson. Very, very talented.
I can't believe it.
Did you feel that on your golf swing? That shoulder?
This was part of the reason why this episode was written, to get a little more insight into the Dick Don secret.
They did an incredible job with the casting. I mean, everybody is so perfect for their part. I really can't imagine anyone else playing any of these characters now. It's funny, they cast all these actors who have been working a long time, who have actually been in a lot of things, who are very experienced and very professional, but are not necessarily, on the covers of magazines. I think that was a great idea because you're really able to see the characters then and not the people as celebrities or stars. And yeah, that was something that happened with The Sopranos as well, something that happened with The West Wing, casting these great actors, but not necessarily that known. So you're able to really see them for their characters. I think another interesting thing is I don't think any of us will actually end up being typecast because we look so different. And as much as we have in common with our characters, we are very different from our characters, a lot of us. And it's just a bunch of character actors, really. A bunch of just people just really melting into their roles.
I think we're coming up on where it fell down onto his head, actually. I think this
might have been where it was.
This might have been it, right around the banging on the watch with the cigarette.
The interminable meeting. Well, I think he was operating under the assumption that he can hide from his past, and we all know that that rarely works. This is downtown LA at the Quality Cafe. You've seen this location in many things.
What, Swingers?
No,
Right?
so this is not Swingers. They did not use this here, but they did use it at the beginning of Training Day. This is where
That's
Denzel
right,
Washington
that's right,
and
that's
Ethan
right,
Hawke have
that's
their first meeting.
That's right. Was it in 7?
Probably. They use this location
Yeah.
for a lot of things.
The biggest thing that the costumes do for sure is change how you walk and how you sit when you're wearing those girdles and the tight dresses and the heels. You walk and sit different. Peggy's interesting because she has very different costumes than the rest of the women. Her costumes they kind of fall over from the 50s. She doesn't have the tight skirts yet. In one episode before the padding, I got a tight dress. That was like the first and only one the entire season. And then I started the padding. Her costumes are much more actually coming from the 50s. She's got the collared shirts, the little cardigans, the sort of longer skirts that go to like mid-calf, lower heels, whereas Joan gets the super tight, super curvy higher heels and higher hemlines. Peggy is much more conservative, much younger. Colors are very neutral. A lot of collars. That was a very Peggy look. Janie was very specific about that she was going to have. That she has a different look from the other girls.
Well, as we find out later in the show, he's a kid when I'm in the Army, and I'm in the Army as a fairly young guy. So, I mean, we're 8 or 9 years apart at least. This is obviously much more is made clearer later in the series, but the idea of Don sort of
I'd love to eat right now, but I can't.
clinging to this sense of, I don't have this past, this is not my past, I am this person, I will only be this person, is certainly revisited throughout the rest of the show. Marriage was a very planned thing. It was what everybody did of a certain economic and social strata, and you would try to marry up or try to marry well. And it was very often not about the two individuals, but about the two families. We see a lot of examples of that in the Pete Trudy relationship, but also in maybe a little bit in the Don Betty thing, is that Don picks Betty because she represents what he is trying to become.
I don't see Ken getting married anytime.
Ken is happily single,
Yeah.
I think.
I think he represents the bachelor.
But also, like in the business world, not being married after a certain age represented
some sort of
deficiency. Character deficiency.
Okay.
I miss you.
Another thing that I loved about where the season went was I think a lot of people expected Pete and Peggy to have some sort of torrid affair, and for him to come back and them to, I don't know, continue sleeping with each other. I don't know, but I know a lot of people thought that was going to happen, and things never happen as you expect with this show, and I think that's why people love it. You cannot predict it. I loved that when he came back, that was it, that it didn't happen, and it took a lot longer for things to take another step with them than people thought, and I think that was a great idea of the writers and a great idea of Matt, because it added attention to their relationship that would not have been there if they had just immediately fallen back into bed together. You didn't know what was going to happen at that point, and I thought that was brilliant. And, we didn't know how it was going to go. We made the pilot a year before we started actually filming the first season. So we had no idea where our characters were going to go, I didn't know about Peggy's pregnancy until about 2 or 3 weeks before we started shooting the second episode. So it was a year after we made the pilot. So none of us knew where things were going.
Is he in there?
This is the first time we see worlds colliding.
Please go inside.
So Peggy is terrified. She thinks that I'm off with my mistress.
I'll be right back.
This is a very interesting scene and a really interesting episode for Peggy. It's the only time that Betty and Peggy meet. And January and I have actually spoken about it. We don't anticipate them meeting again. We just don't see how it can happen. So this is the only scene that we have together, which was really, really fun for us to get to finally work together. Betty comes to the office, and Peggy has to do her job and do it well and cover for Dawn. And she doesn't know what to do, so she goes to Joan to help her out, and Joan, in typical style, tells her exactly what to do and then tells her that, she was wrong for asking, which is very Joan. And this is one of my favorite scenes in the whole season. It's so quintessentially Peggy and Joan, and it's like it was like a little tennis match going back and forth between me and her. It's a brilliant scene, the way it's written. And a lot of the show, you just have to do what's written on the page. It's all there. And the characters are so perfectly drawn out, and there's so many layers to them that all you have to do is really just read what's on the page, and this is one of those scenes. It was all there. We had so much fun doing it.
Please hurry.
Please
So
hurry.
She lights
Yeah,
a
right.
cigarette.
Peggy, use your needle. You're making this so complicated. You go
The power of information.
Get some Hershey bars from the cart.
They have a very specific relationship,
It is the truth.
which basically consists of Joan telling Peggy what to do and
And you just start apologizing.
getting what she can out of Peggy to suit her own needs, and Peggy getting what she can out of Joan. And it's very specific, and that scene really shows it, that they're not friends.
I'm not going to tell anybody, but you shouldn't have told anybody that.
There's a reason why people love Joan.
It's really funny. I barely saw January in the first season, except when we'd get together for social stuff outside of working, because we just don't work together. So it was a real kind of treat to have her in the office. She only works on the set that is our home set, which is on the stage right next door to the office. And she works with Dawn, and she works with Francine and the kids, and she doesn't get to come over. It sucks, I'm sure. We'd love to have her. So it was great to have her be a part of the office and get to be there for a little bit. It was really cool.
That's it.
Want to pay for lunch? You know, there's a certain thing. I don't have brothers, but a lot of my friends do, and there's a certain bond that brothers have. Again, Don and Adam are half brothers. They have the same father but different mothers, and you know, he's his kid brother. This little kid looked up to him his whole life.
I'm gonna walk out that door. That's it. I'm not buying your lunch. Because this never happened.
Don is also has a very powerful will, and is trying to will this out of existence.
I don't like black liquor.
One of the interesting things about this scene that I feel is that Peggy actually has the control. Here is Don's wife, who should know him more than anyone else, that is closer to him than anyone else, that should be more involved in his life than anyone else. And she's not in this moment. Peggy has the control, and Peggy knows more. And there's that great line where she actually says, "You must know more about him than I do," or something like that. And it's horrible because it's absolutely true. And this scene really shows the dynamic of the time between the women in the office, the secretaries, and the women at home, and how different they are. I mean, they just come from two completely different worlds and have two completely different jobs, but are inextricably linked to this one man who they both love, really, in different ways, but they both love. And the meeting of the two women, I think, is brilliant. It shows how different a woman who is a wife and children of that time is as opposed to a woman who would be working in an office like that.
I think the office politics play a big part in this show. When we first meet Peggy in the pilot, she knows none of it. When we first meet Pete in the pilot, Don gives him some very sage advice that he totally ignores. And we see a lot of it running through the whole thing when Roger hits on Betty and sort of breaks an unwritten code there and gets chastised by Don indirectly. The idea of these worlds colliding, too, is very strange. When the wives show up in the office, it's always a very awkward thing. We see several occasions of it, not just Don's wife, but Pete's wife and Roger's wife all coming in.
That's, I think, one of the things that Matt was trying to show with this scene was that the secretaries at that time sometimes knew more about the men than their wives did. It's not necessarily a good thing, but they did. And they knew a whole other side of the men that the wives didn't. In that way, we're closer to them, almost a more honest relationship, sadly. In that scene, Peggy, I think, really kind of crosses a line and kind of turns a corner because she really becomes a part of Don's world at that point, because she's starting to know what's going on with him. He's starting to fall from the high pedestal that she's put him on and become a real person and not a superhero. And she really kind of turns a corner in that scene, and she's a part of the office from then on.
Off on these too. Am I wrong? I really expect the royal treatment when I go to Don's office, and I seldom get it. It's like walking into another country where I don't speak the language.
At Carlton's, I feel like I'm stupid. All that Manhattan talk.
I think the idea is that Don is of a certain level at the office, so A, she should be treated with that same respect, but also B, Don should make a big deal when she shows up, which, as we can see, does not happen.
Directly to the bank. Banking products.
One of the things that this show gets into is the different kinds of love. The love between men and women, husbands and wives, men, girls, friendships. I mean, all the men at the show are, in a way, in love with Don. They look up to him, respect him, want to be him, care about what he thinks of them. The women as well. His wife, there's a whole kind of love there. And there's a love that he has with, his mistresses. It's the love between Pete and Peggy, which is a very specific thing. It explores so many different kinds of relationships, this show. I feel that, for me at least, the whole fact that it is in 1960 fades away very quickly for me and becomes about the people and about the relationships. And I don't think the show would have the success and the resonance that it does have with its audience if it didn't show these characters, really get into who these people are. It would not be as interesting.
What are you laughing at?
A portion of our customers are
I
already,
think Don's relationship with Peggy is unlike his relationship with almost everybody else in the show. I think he respects Peggy. Peggy comes from Brooklyn and is sort of trying to better herself through her own hard work, and I think he respects that and treats her as sort of a protege in a lot of ways.
I think that this is the episode where she really turns a corner and becomes good at her job, at being a secretary. She really learns a lesson in this one. She is now inextricably linked with Don. She's keeping a secret for him, which is not the first time that a secretary has done that, but it's the first time that she's done it. So she now knows something about him that nobody else does, and she knows which envelope not to open. She doesn't ask him where he's going at lunch, and she plans to cover for him again if that happens. She really kind of takes a step in this episode and becomes really good at her job.
to see someone's passion be.
This was one of the on-the-fly post-injury scenes here. I think it was hardest on wardrobe, actually. You were talking about research, and then it sort of, struck me about maybe the middle of the second episode, the similarities of these guys, and at least how I felt on the set, being in advertising and being an actor. I was like, here I am at work, limitless Fritos, I'm hanging out, and we have a blast on set. And when I am working, I get to say things that I would never be clever enough to make up. And I think that a lot of similarities there.
I think it's heartbreaking to her to learn this about Don, to learn that he is not this perfect person that she perhaps thought he was. I think, on the other hand, she doesn't lose respect for him and still looks up to him very much as a person and as her boss. But she sees now kind of more of the real world, and it's a real reality check for her as far as what's going on around the office, and as far as what her job is as well. She has this line, she says, "That's my job." And I loved that line because it was very simple. It's just 3 words, but it was like, well, that's what she is going through. She did not realize that that was her job, covering for her boss and his affairs, entertaining his wife when she comes to the office. and she did not realize that that was part of her job, and I think that she doesn't plan for that to be her job for very long.
It's also like, again, talk about different people's reactions to the same thing, and Peggy's sort of crestfallen that Don, who she thought was this sort of paragon of virtue because she turned down her advance in the pilot, realizes that he's not quite as perfect as she thought. And Joan, of course, reacts like, everybody's into me, so now I know why he's not.
Hello, sweetheart.
Hello, dear.
Well?
The Campbells don't believe in overhead lighting.
Charlie Fittich came by the house this afternoon.
Did he? Here. I guess your lunch did go well.
Wasn't lunch? Told you that?
So what did he say? Don't tease me.
He said he was going to get you published.
That is incredibly swell news. When? Where?
Boys Life magazine.
What?
It's a $40 fee.
That may have been the first time we've seen him touch her this whole episode. You know, he just reached out and grabbed her arm.
That story was good enough for the New Yorker. And don't act like those magazines do everything on merit.
I thought you'd be happy.
For a year's work. You don't want me to have what I want.
You're going to be published.
Boy's Life.
Do you think that music's playing in their house? Or
Yes.
is it...
Some ad for exploding cigars.
I could have gotten you in the New Yorker. Or in the Encyclopedia Britannica if I wanted to.
So, why didn't you?
Why would you do that?
The idea that Pete, thinks that nothing nothing happens through merit is very Pete Campbell. That he thinks everything is connections, and it's all who you know. And why wouldn't you use who you know to get what you want? Is sort of sad and awful, but very Pete.
That's good.
I wish it wasn't so far.
With this episode, it also levels the playing field for Don and Peggy because they're now on the same level. She knows something about him. She could call his wife and cause a lot of trouble for him. And they are now not necessarily on the same level, but there is a relationship of trust now that has been established. And I think that he does start to know that she knows. I think when he comes in and she says, I didn't know where you were, I'm so sorry, I'm so stupid, blah, 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 I think in that moment, he knows that she knows that something is going on. And at that moment, that trust is established, and things are never the same for them from there on out. Not necessarily in a bad way, but things are different.
Those pictures that they used, like that picture, do you know who those people were or where they took those pictures?
This picture is me and
Is it?
Yeah, and the kid who played the younger version of Adam. It was just about getting different wardrobe and finding a set and then aging the pictures. Again, part of Don just trying to eliminate his past, which of course can't be done. This was in an actual sort of SRO hotel downtown that looks like it hasn't changed much since the 50s.
Hello.
I need to see you tonight. Are you busy?
For you? Of course not.
Good. I'm leaving now.
From where?
25 minutes.
I don't even know what you drink.
whatever you have.
A lot of people wondered what you were about to bring out of here. What was in the drawer?
You know, it's always easier to be in scenes with other people. When you're by yourself, there's a lot that can be misinterpreted, but you know, that it's all there for you. If the director does their job and every other department head does their job, it's not that hard to get the mood across. And if it's a good story, which ours is, makes it a lot easier.
Sit down.
One of the great things about the show is that it really does show real people, and it shows everything is not as it seems. You know, the tagline for the show is where the truth lies. And I think it's kind of brilliant because that is exactly what the show is. Don is not who you think he is. Betty is not who you think she is. And Peggy isn't. No one is. Nothing is actually going on that you think is going on. Everybody is lying. Everybody is covering something up. Everybody has a secret. I think it adds such attention to the show because the audience knows, but so many of the characters don't, so you're constantly negotiating when are these people going to find out about each other's secrets, which are so numerous. Yeah, and I think it definitely deals with the idea of what is the American dream. Don seems to have it all. He's this handsome, dashing man married to a beautiful wife, beautiful home, great job. He's made partner, these wonderful things, and it is not like that at all for him. With Peggy, you know, she's young. She's got this great job in an advertising agency. She's living in New York City. It's very exciting. But things are not like that. Things are not the way that they seem. She's been jilted by Pete. You know, things didn't go that way for her. She's gaining weight, and she gets pregnant. I mean, it's just... To break into the boys' club, you have to work twice as hard in that era. And you have to be twice as smart and twice as good at what you do. And there were quite a few women at that time who were very successful in advertising and in other fields, but they were the first. And they had to be very smart, and they had to be very strong, and they had to put up with a lot. Peggy has that. She would not be making it in the field that she's making it in if she didn't have that. And for all her innocence and naivete, she's actually very strong and has a lot of confidence.
That's not right.
Don's idea is that everybody wants something and everybody's angling for something, especially from his past, and his idea is to remove those people by whatever means necessary. And $5,000 was a significant amount of money back then. I couldn't put a figure on it, but it's a lot of money, especially in cash.
What did Pete say he made a week? His salary was something like...
Yeah, like $75 a week.
$75 a week.
It's a year's salary of some sort, but this is an honest attempt for Don to sort of give his brother a leg up and say, here, take this and go do what I did and make something out of your life. Here's all I can do for you. Because I think he does really love his brother and realize that, you know, the situation that he's in is not his fault, but he can change it. Don's very, you know, Ayn Rand comes up in a lot of this stuff is very much that rugged individualist and depends on only himself, and as such tends to push other people out of his life. But you know, he's giving his brother this gift, he thinks, of a new life, when all his brother really wants is a connection, a relationship. But that's not how Don operates. And of course, 5G, the hotel room, and 5G, the monetary amount.
It's been fun to live that character. I often forget that it is 1960. I just do. I get lost in the characters themselves and the stories themselves. I think one of the great things about it is they are as different as that era is from now. The characters are so real and have so much depth to them and are so well drawn out that you can get wrapped up in them and you can identify with them. It's the same stories. People are constantly asking us, the big question is, do you think women were treated differently then than they are now? I think that they were treated differently, but not necessarily thought of differently.
I know you're going to my family's house in Cape May, and I know even though my
The one big question they always ask the women is, are women treated differently now than they were then? And I think that's a very good question, and it's hard to answer because, yes, they are definitely treated differently. Whether or not they're thought of differently is a different story. And this is obviously in a very general way. I think none of the men I personally know, are very kind and have the utmost respect for women. But in a more general way, I would say that just the way that it has gone about is different. We have laws about equality. Women can hold the same positions as men. Then you have on the other side certain things in the media, certain things on television. You have the internet, where women are exploited constantly, every second of every day. So to say that things have really, really improved is not necessarily true. I think that things have improved in a work atmosphere, absolutely. A woman can hold the same position as a man, no problem today. But as far as on a more general basis and on a more personal basis, I think that it's just different the way that people go about it now.
Ending on a bit of a melancholy note.
Right. Ending where it began, but quite a different note.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of feel like it's the first time we really met Ken, in a way. I mean, sort of seeing him interact with other guys, but sort of stepping out and finding out that he's a writer and he has something to offer the office and the world outside of funny quips and sort of talking about the ladies. And it was a lot of fun to come back from my honeymoon and find that script and get that message from Rich and kind of meet the guy.